Hi, welcome back to another Sew With Me sewing tutorial video. Today we're going to be sewing the stretch halter top. So if you're interested, go ahead and stay tuned for the video. So first, of course, we're going to start with the Sew With Me sewing pattern for this halter top. We have one front piece, one front band, one back piece, and one back band. So you're going to cut majority of these pieces on the fold, and you're also going to cut two of your front piece. This is a stretch pattern, so it does call for stretchy fabric. You can either do a two-way stretch or a four-way stretch. And when you fold the fabric in half, make sure that the stretch is going horizontal, so that way it will stretch around your body and not up and down. Now that we have our pattern pieces cut out, we want to go ahead and notch our pattern pieces where the notches are, so that way when we put our pieces together, they can fit how they're supposed to and make the garment how it's supposed to come out. I used to think that you can sew without the notches, but once I started using notches, it made me realize like why you're supposed to use them. So take it from me, make sure you notch these sewing patterns. Okay, so first we're gonna start with the two front pieces. They should be symmetrical, so you have the inside and the arm hole of the top. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a ruler and we're gonna mark 1 inch on the inside of these sewing patterns, so that way we can fold them over and hem the fabric, so for a neater look. You want to make sure that you do this to both of your pattern pieces, and you also want to go ahead and mark 1 inch from the armhole side also on both of your pattern pieces. Once you're done marking your fold lines, you can go ahead and start folding the fabric toward the edge of the fabric towards your line, so that way to give you a perfect 1/2 inch. Folding the inside of the top is a little bit easier than the armhole of the top, because the armhole has such a drastic curve compared to the front. But if you go slow enough and you take your time, you'll be able to go ahead and make your raw edge. And as you're folding, make sure you pin as you go, so that way you can hold your fabric in place before you run it through the machine. When you're done folding and pinning both pieces, it should look like this. Now you want to unfold that back piece and do basically the same thing that we did with our two front pieces. From the raw edge at the top, you're going to make a line with your ruler 1 inch away from the raw edge. Fold your fabric to that fold line and make sure you pin in place. So now it's time to bring it to the machine. So we're going to use a zigzag stitch, and the length and the width of the stitch is going to be a 2. So what you see me doing here is just running a zigzag stitch down the front end of the top and on the armpit of the top on both of our pattern pieces. And I'm also going to do the same thing. Make sure you take your time. That way you're able to pull out any pins that you have holding your garment in place. So when you're done running those folded pieces through the machine, you should have something like this. So now we're going to go ahead and attach our two front pieces with our front band. So this is where those notches come in really handy, because we're going to have to use those to line up our pieces when we lay our front pieces on top of the band. So that way we can pin them in place and For the back piece and the back band, do the same thing that we did for the front pieces and the front band. Use your notches to line everything up correctly, pin in place, so that way we can run it through the machine. Now we run everything through the machine with a 1/2 inch seam allowance just to connect our front pieces together and our back pieces together. All right, now that we have our pieces combined, what we're gonna do is we're gonna fold that seam allowance down towards the hem, flip our garment piece right side up so that way we can run it through the machine as a top stitch and top stitch that seam allowance down in place. Make sure you do this to the front piece and the back piece. Once you've done that, it should look like this. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take that front piece and we're gonna lay it right sides up, and then we're gonna take our back piece and lay that with right sides facing, so facing downward, and we're gonna connect them on one of the side seams. So now that we have our side seam pinned, we're gonna go ahead and take to the machine and sew it down with a zigzag stitch with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So now that we have our side seam created, what we're gonna do is we're gonna open up that seam, and on each side of that seam, a 1/4 inch away from it, we're gonna go ahead and zigzag that seam down into place. All right, so now that we have the side seam done and it's starting to kind of look like a top now, we can go ahead and start hemming the bottom of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up the garment with the wrong side facing up. So that way we can get a straight line at the bottom and take our ruler, and 1 inch away from that raw edge, we're going to go ahead and mark our fold line. And then just like we did on the top, we're going to go ahead and fold that raw edge towards the line, pin. In my opinion, this is a very beginner-friendly, sewing project. It really is just matching up notches and learning how to hem different things and attaching different pieces and still coming out with something really cute at the end. So, in my opinion, this is a good way if you are starting to sew or you wanna learn something new, is using a So now that we have everything hemmed with the outside of the fabric facing towards you, what we're going to do is match our side seams and go ahead and pin them in place and sew them down like we did. Remember, we are sewing this with a zigzag stitch a half inch away from the raw edge. Again, we are opening up those seams and going ahead and top stitching those seams down into place. So now that we have our side seams sewn down, we can go ahead and close this thing at the neck. So what we're going to do is we're going to fold the pieces on top of each other, right sides facing at the neck, and go ahead and pin them into place. So that way we can go ahead and take them to the sewing machine and sew them. And just like we did with our side seams, we're going to open those seams up and we're going to go ahead and top stitch those seams down into place so that way they can lay flat. Once you're done sewing those seams into place, the garment is complete. In my opinion, like I said, that this is a quick and easy, beginner-friendly sewing pattern. If you are interested in this pattern, feel free to give my website a visit at SewWithMec.com, where you can find this pattern along with a bunch of other sewing patterns that are tested by people that sew. So that way you do know that they do fit you and fit others. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and give my website a follow. Go ahead and like, share, and all of that. Thank you.